Hello everybody and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History's Fave Film Fashion. In this episode we're going under his eye to look at the costumes from the Hulu original series The Handmaid's Tale, starring Elizabeth Moss, with costumes by Ane Crabtree. Miss Crabtree is, I think, probably the best costume designer operating today. I absolutely love her work. I love her intelligence. I love her instinct. She did the costumes also for Masters of Sex, which I absolutely loved. It had such accurate period tailoring, which is why it upset me so much that the hair department screwed up so badly. I'm sorry, nobody in the 60s had messy ends like this. Didn't happen. Ane Crabtree also did the costumes for HBO's Westworld. Did you see that? I loved Westworld, even though I had to text my brother after every episode so he could explain it to me. I don't always understand sci-fi plots, but the costumes were wonderful. But so far, I think Ane Crabtree's best work has been in recreating this dystopian universe in the Hulu original A Handmaid's Tale. A Handmaid's Tale is, of course, based on Margaret Atwood's 1985 novel set in the not-so-distant future where the United States has been replaced by a republic called Gilead, which operates on a very strict Christian, pseudo-Christian fundamentalism, and women have been categorized into a caste system. And this caste system is exemplified by the palette used in their wardrobes, which is sort of like uniforms. Red for the handmaidens, teal for the wives, olive brown for the aunts, and a sort of taupe grey for the Marthas. I'm going to go through each of these categories in a second, but I want you to think about the color and the way that Ane mixed these colors and arrived at these original versions. Now, in basic color theory, these colors are not supposed to work together, even though they work together so beautifully on the screen. But via palette, because these colors do not traditionally go together, there is already a tension. It creates a tension between the characters, which of course there is. Let's start with the handmaids themselves. These are the fertile women of Gilead who are subjugated and sort of enslaved by the infertile elite to produce their children for them. Ane Crabtree mixed this shade of red very deliberately. She actually has a name for it, Life Force Red. She wanted the characters to, quote, look like walking wombs. This red is also rather medieval, I think. When the handmaids are outside, they wear heavy wool cloaks that fall to the floor. This sense of heaviness is emotional as well as physical. And on their heads they wear these very deep linen bonnets, which we'll talk about in a second. When they take their cloaks off, beneath they wear these rather beautiful and elegant, I think, scoop neck 3/4 sleeve dresses that fall to the calf, and a standard historic linen coif on their heads. I did quite a bit of research into Ane Crabtree before I put this together, and she says she always starts with beauty and then messes it up. And I think you can really see that these costumes here really are kind of elegant, and yet at the same time there's something sort of warped about them, isn't there? Her inspiration was drawn from the Amish, of course, but when I first saw these dresses, I immediately thought of Bruegel the Younger. So she's drawing from fashion history an awful lot too, even back to the Middle Ages. Take a look at this dress here, and then look at Elizabeth Moss' dress with the tight sleeves and the scoop neck. It's essentially the same dress. Ane Crabtree also says she drew inspiration from Vivienne Westwood to get that sense of drama across. But what stops these costumes looking too costumey or too period are little contemporary touches. For example, when the handmaids are indoors, they'll often wear a sweatshirt over their dresses in exactly the same red. When they're outside, they'll wear a scarf in the same red. All of the costumes in Handmaid's Tale really look like clothes. They look like these are real clothes worn by people who live in this terrible dystopian universe. But of course, what people are talking about are these incredible bonnets that the handmaids wear. These bonnets feature in Margaret Atwood's original book, but of course they make a challenge, don't they, for acting, because it's very difficult to see the character's face. Ane Crabtree says they tried all kinds of alternatives to this bonnet, scarves, etc., but they decided to go back to Atwood's original idea, because these bonnets, of course, stop the handmaids looking out as much as it stops people looking at their faces, because these are really anonymous producers of children, right? But evidently it led to a very different kind of acting that added to the tension of the whole show. When I first saw them, naturally I thought of traditional nuns with their starched headdresses, but I also thought of those deep bonnets from the 1830s, which again really was the height of this woman as possession moment in the Victorian psyche, where it stopped people looking at upper-class Victorian women, middle-class Victorian women, but it also stopped them looking out at the horrors of the world. So these were the influences that I thought Ane Crabtree had drawn upon, but in an interview I read, she said that her main influence were the older Korean ladies she would see around Los Angeles wearing their incredible visors. So you see, inspiration really does come from the most unlikely places sometimes, doesn't it? Next cast we'll look at, cast in both senses of the word, are the aunts, and their scary Aunt Lydia. The aunts are the only women in Gilead with any power. They control the handmaidens, often with cattle prodders. They're sort of the female heavies of the ruling male elite of Gilead. And when we see this palette, we automatically, of course, think of Hitler's brown shirts, don't we? Miss Crabtree says she drew inspiration for the aunts' costumes from priests' cassocks, and from British uniforms in World War I, like this dispatch rider's uniform. But you know what? Inspiration can come from the most surprising places. These long vests with turtlenecks or blouses underneath, Ane Crabtree says were inspired by, of all things, Maud. B. Arthur's wardrobe in Maud. Now, I would never have made that cultural connection. Inspiration for the aunts was also drawn from feminist artist Judy Chicago, particularly her iconic piece, The Dinner Party, where Judy Chicago made plates that looked like ladies' private bits. So if you take a look at this piece of work by Judy Chicago and then look at the collar on Aunt Lydia's vest, you can see it evokes sort of an inverted vajayjay. Next up, the Marthas. The Marthas are the infertile women of Gilead who become the housekeepers, the domestic servants, unpaid, of the ruling elite. Ane Crabtree says that she drew inspiration for these costumes from, I'm sure you can guess already, Soviet farm workers from the 1950s, but she also said she was inspired by Elizabeth Taylor in the 1960s. I think probably because of those simple dresses with, of course, that sort of iconic 1960s, very boxy headscarf. In terms of palette, she created this very unusual taupe, which she said was inspired by a beautiful furry moth she saw. This shade of taupe is sort of ephemeral and it kind of fades into the background, just as the Marthas kind of fade into the background of the household in which they work. I absolutely love this colour and I think these costumes are terribly chic actually. But come on, I know who's watching this video, I know my audience, and I know we all like the costumes the wives wear the best. So chic! created in this beautiful teal, although the shade of teal changes depending on the status of the wives. The wives are the wives of the ruling class, the commanders. These are wealthy women, and so although their clothes have no embellishments or frills or lace or furbelows, you can really see their status with beautiful stitchwork, folds and pleats, all of it just so beautifully done. I would love to have Serena Joy's wardrobe. And in contrast to the cottons and the linens that the handmaids and the Marthas wear, the wives' wardrobe is fashioned from beautiful textiles, satins and silk, light gauze. It's absolutely exquisite. I think in terms of inspiration for the wives' wardrobes, these slinky, calf-length, beautifully tailored dresses definitely comes from the 1930s. Like this dress, which actually looks like it could be part of the Handmaid's Tale wardrobe, as does this one. And I think this is very deliberate. The 1930s saw the rise of fascism, didn't it? Mussolini in Italy, Franco in Spain, and of course Hitler came to power in 1933. So this really has that kind of fascist wife vibe to it. Unfortunately, I couldn't get a good screenshot of the episode Jezebels, which was set in an illicit brothel, but it was pure Weimar Republic, which of course, again, speaks to that moment just before the rise of fascism, just before Hitler took power. And all of the costumes in that episode really were evocative of the Weimar Republic, of Cabaret, which of course is set in the Weimar Republic, and of Madonna in the 90s when she brought out her book Sex, which was very inspired in part by the Weimar Republic. And so all of these Weimar influences are there, which is the reason I think that Ane Crabtree chose a very 1920s sort of flapper dress for Elizabeth Moss with that deco beaded detail. Costume inspiration for A Handmaid's Tale came from absolutely everywhere, with one notable exception: the 1990 movie version, because it looks so dated. Look at those hairdos. Ane Crabtree really didn't want her costumes to date, and I really don't think they do, or that they will, because she genuinely created a real universe with her costumes. You believe that these are clothes. Well, as they say in Gilead, praise be. I'm off to watch the season finale. Very excited. You can contact me through my website, amandahalley.com. Join our Facebook group. We always have a good time over there. I'm back every week with new episodes on the ultimate fashion history, so just click the little circle to subscribe. And until then, nolite tempestatus carborundorum. Bye for now.